Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello everyone, welcome back to Right on Track. I am thrilled because joining me today is Jason Callear. Hey Jason.
Hey, how's it doing? All right?
I'm doing great, how are you?
Yeah, great actually. A little bit wet here in the UK.
Yeah, it was raining here earlier. I'm happy it's fall though. I was kind of over the hot summer heat, so I'm excited it's fall.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm so excited you're joining me today. We have a lot to talk about, but before we dive into specifics, can you share with the listeners a little about yourself and how you got started in music?
Sure. So I started playing guitar in 1978 at the age of 6, and it was really just by accident, really. I just got a guitar given to me, but I'd already sort of got interested in listening to a lot of music, a lot of different genres, in country, Beatles, Stones, rock, blues, all sorts of stuff. And so I really wanted to play something, but my obsession really has always been recording music. So for a long time, I've been really trying to perfect that and really present the tunes. I was in a lot of bands throughout the sort of 80s, 90s, and then for the last sort of 10, 15 years, done a lot of solo recording. So releasing music, and it's a kind of dream come true.
That's fabulous. I definitely want to talk a lot about your experiences with recording because as technology has changed over the past many years, the way we record music has changed. So, what was recording like when you started?
I remember the first real recording studio I went into in the late 80s, which was the kind of old reel to reel tape. And you had to go in there very rehearsed, very prepared. It was expensive. Um, but on the plus side, a really nice environment to be in. Always sort of, lots of gadgets and things around to play with. And, it's a great sound. But you had to be well rehearsed. You did your demo tape and then you went home. And although it was great times, you got what you got. If you needed to go back, you had to start all over again.
I think that's really interesting. And do you think that because how technology has made it so easy to do pitch correction and add all these instruments with MIDI and fix anything that goes wrong during recording, do you think with all of that that it's made artists not as aware or, you know, eager to rehearse a lot before they go to record because they know their producer can take care of all that?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I also think that maybe the creativity side of things changes a little bit now with modern technology, in that you can kind of just piece ideas together over time. So you maybe don't complete something in the first instance, but as time goes by, you're able to go back and piece these pieces of jigsaw together, almost like a collage. And that I think is really interesting because you never really know what you're going to end up with till you get to the end of the process. And presentation wise, I think like it's an even field now. So if you want to go ahead and tune everything and polish everything, then you probably will. Um, and it all depends, I think, what sort of sound you want. I try to be as honest as possible. But of course, you do a few takes and you pick the best bits, and you want to present it in the best possible way. So the technology certainly helps us to do that these days.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I think my favorite part about the recording process is kind of what you were saying with the creativity side of things, where you start from something, you see what we can add here, and bringing in collaborators and working with producers and getting various opinions and even taking a song that you fully produce and making it more stripped back for another version to release or whatever. And I think it allows for a lot more freedom. But on the other hand, when it comes to the vocals, especially, I try to rehearse as much as possible because even though my producer can fix my timing and fix my pitch if I'm slightly off. I think it's really important to try to be as consistent and accurate on your own so you don't have to rely on the technology to make it sound better.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I think usually speaking, the energy and enthusiasm in the first performance is usually the best take in any case. So, you know, if you keep going over it and going over it, it usually starts to get tired. And yeah, I would agree with that.
What do you think your favorite part about being an engineer is?
Being an engineer now nowadays, I think it's getting more interesting, especially more computerized, more processing available to you, more software available to you, and in some cases, I suppose you have to be really sort of computer literate to even go into a studio these days.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I've actually considered learning like logic, and then I'm like, okay, I don't have the time to like learn all the computer stuff. And my passion lies with the songwriting. And I think because recording has become so complex, you really need to know what you're doing. Like, I can do very stripped demos here at my house myself to show my producer what I'm doing and send it to my musicians if I'm having guitar, drums, or whatever, like recorded live. But I think in terms of doing something myself, I think it's important to be working with somebody who knows what they're doing. Because I think one of the other questions I want to ask you too is as recording has changed and the quality of commercial music is now, how have you found working to keep with the industry standard while also finding new ways of being creative and staying on top of the technological side?
Yeah, I think I certainly got the basics down, so I'm able to record things at home. I do some of it, but of course you can now send those files off to professional studios, and they'll bring them in. So the studio that I use Pro Tools. That's Inspire Music Studios, and they'll bring in the pieces of takes and whatnot that I've done, and they'll make them up to the modern standards and up to scratch with the modern production techniques. Because there's an awful lot of things going on in these recordings these days, bouncing things around and sort of putting bass and drums together and double tracking and all of these techniques that is not just a raw recording. It's kind of knowing how to use the processing.
For sure. So, what do you think is one of the biggest lessons you've learned over the years with the recording process?
Probably not to be too clever. I think again with the modern recording and back to what I was saying earlier about going back and piecing things together, sometimes it's difficult to know when to stop. And you have to draw a line at some point and get it out there and let people listen to it. So it's I always kind of think, does it need a bit more? Does it need some more strings? Does it need harps? Does it need piano? And you can kind of drive yourself insane if you're not careful. So I think less is more sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. Um, it's really funny because I'm like super hands-on with my recording, even though I don't do the stuff on the computer or anything. Like, I'm really hands-on in the studio, adding instruments, working with my producer. And it's really funny because when we get to the mixing stage, my ears are like super sensitive and they pick up on like everything in my music. And so he'll send me mixes and I'm like, hey Bob, like this one part here, like can you change that? Like maybe can you raise this instrument, lower that? And he'll send stuff back and forth a couple of times. And it gets to the point where I'm like, I feel so bad to send you another message. Can you do this now? So I agree, like you have to get it to a point of being okay with where it's at. Because I think too, like it's art, so it's never going to be flawless. So you have to get to the point of, okay, this is polished enough to release. Because if it was up to me, like none of my music would be out because I would keep changing stuff a million times.
Yeah, no, that's really key. And I think I've taken so long over these things that they kind of drag on for years. I've been 5 years on each album, so 10 years just to do two albums, and you think to yourself, was that really necessary? I do some of the tracks myself. I do the drums, I do the guitars mainly. I do most of the bass guitars and a little bit of keyboards. But I think what helps is when you get other people involved. You'll get another piano player in. He'll have a different style, maybe that just works. And I may say to another guitarist, just take the lead break on this, see what comes up. And it's a refreshing change because if I do everything, then it'll always sound the same. So
Yeah.
I think collaboration is key as well. Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So now I want to shift gears a little and talk about your experience working with other musicians and your journey with working with bands and bringing musicians together. So can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose back in the 90s when I was doing a lot of work live, I was a drummer for many years. Um, I started teaching some young musicians in the area individually to start with, and then it kind of just grew into why don't we just all jam together? So I was bringing these young guys that they were between the ages of 8 and 11 years old, and I get them to jam together, and it was just simple stuff. But I think in the end, just the process of getting people together and saying, you've got to feel how you interact with the other musicians in the room and start to listen to what's going on and get tight. That really worked. And yeah, they went on to be professional musicians and they still play together and they do their studio work and session and everything else. So in a lot of ways, that's really nice, and I'm really proud that those guys made a success of that. Um, Really nice story.
Oh, I love that so much. I love how you saw something in them, put them together, and it worked out really well. That ties into sort of what we were talking about with the studio collaboration. Anytime you're collaborating with another musician, there's a lot of things that you need to keep in mind in order for collaborations to go well and for those relationships to grow and continue to evolve over time. So, overall, what are some things that you think all musicians need to keep in mind in any kind of collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit of give and take, really. It's just to listen, listen to what other people have to say, and listen to what they're doing. You can always have a lot of great ideas, and sometimes it might be a little bit autocratic, and you say, I want this, I want that, and if someone might say, well, have you thought about doing it this way, changing that structure slightly, changing that timing slightly, and it's just good to sit back and listen to what people are saying. It may be, you know, yeah, that doesn't quite work, or we'll stick to the original plan, but you never know. And it's happened a few times personally that yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. So it's yeah, just listen to what people are saying and enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I think listening is really important, respecting everybody's ideas, and I think just overall, like you said, enjoy it, have fun. I think sometimes when we're creating music and we want to be successful, we can get caught up in is this commercial enough or trying to do the best thing for the commercial market or whatever. And I think there have been times, especially when I was in some co-writes and right from the beginning, I felt like there was unnecessary pressure put on the song. And anytime that there's any kind of pressure, even if I'm writing by myself, like if I'm stressed out about something and I'm not in a creative headspace and I have all this other pressure put on me, then I find it really hard to write songs or deliver well in the studio when I'm recording because there's all these other things clouding your mind. So I think reminding yourself to just have fun with it and not put all that pressure on is really important.
Yeah, and I think that that's the case with any kind of performance. Is that if you're kind of under pressure or under the cosh, as we call it, I mean, it's it just kills the energy. And also not to try and chase a particular genre or a particular style too much because usually speaking, by the time you're out, you've missed it. So just do what you feel is best and what is right.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Literally, I mean, I just say like screw genres these days. Like, I don't even like I definitely fall within like pop and country crossover stuff. But I think like when I started songwriting, it was like, oh, I have to do this or this needs to be like this. And I got to the point where I felt like all my songs were starting to sound the same. And where it's important to have a sound and there's different markets and different audiences for different songs. There's so many songs that I'm like a huge fan of that are like commercial hit songs that it's like, is this pop? Is this country? It's on pop radio, it's on country radio. And I think that some people get so tied up in how the song should be written for what genre or whatever. And I think like when you step away from that and truly write something that you want to write, record something you want to write or perform, and it comes from the heart, then it's going to be authentically you, which is one of my biggest things, being authentic and not worry a whole lot about the genres.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that I've tormented myself for years with this kind of thing. I tend to write in a very retro style because all my influences are from 60s, 70s, maybe early 80s, and it just comes out in the songs. There's nothing I can really do about it. So I just have to. I use it as a strap line now. It's, as a this stuff is retro. You might like it. But rather than trying to be up to date, because there's plenty of people doing that and they're doing it really well. And for me, I'd feel kind of phony just going and chasing those styles when I've got a particular style of writing, and well, I'm happy with it, and I'm hoping that there's maybe a few people out there that might go, oh, this sounds kind of retro, but it's cool. I'm kind of
Yeah.
hoping that that's what people think.
Yeah, for sure. I think too, it's like when you have certain influences, especially like you were saying at the beginning that you grew up listening to various genres. And so I think that if you have various influences, then that's naturally going to make you write a certain way and want to craft your songs in a certain way. And for me, it's like I I know who my influences are, which is really important, but I'm not trying to be like any of them. I'm trying to be me. And with what you're saying too, like there's one of my songs that somebody was like, that sounds like 2000s pop. Well, I think 2000s had the best decade of like pop music. Like I love all the pop music from the early 2000s. And so I think like the music that you like naturally influences your own writing. And so I think it's important to just do what's right for you instead of trying to match or mimic something that is going on in the commercial music world just to do it.
That's right. And I remember in the 90s there was a kind of a real trend for going unplugged. Everything was unplugged, acoustic versions of everything. And I thought, I write like that anyway, so everything's unplugged. but um, but it literally sort of struck a chord, not being cheesy about it, but it's such a great thing because still get the dynamics, but you can actually hear what people are doing now.
Yeah.
I was in many a band where the electric guitars were very dominant, and it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. And if you put an electric guitar in there, it then makes a difference rather than just being there for the kind of sake of it. I liked quite a lot of the grunge bands back in the 90s, and but mainly the ballads and the stripped back stuff because it's so great. The melodies were so great, and that's what it's about, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I love stripped back music because really lets the voice shine. And I have a couple fully acoustic songs, and I think those are the ones where you can really hear the lyrics and you can really feel the emotion. And I think going back to the recording a little bit, sometimes that's all a song needs, just like guitar and vocal or piano and vocal. I think sometimes when you add so much production, it can kind of bury the song. And so I think always remembering to do what's best for the song is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the single "Brother" that came out in August just has a kick drum, a guitar, and a vocal, and that's it. And it doesn't even have a chorus, so it's as stripped back as you can get. But they're not all like that. So it's just just that particular song that just worked out that way.
Yeah, for sure. So, perfect transition. You mentioned Brother, and can you share with the listeners what the inspiration behind this song was?
Yeah, I was messing around on a kind of steel guitar, a resonator guitar, at a guitar show, and I just got this lick going, and I thought, "Oh, that sounds really kind of bluegrass and retro," and it kind of just inspired to talk about period in history, the American Civil War. There was a story about some guys that wound up on the opposite side of the fence to each other, but they were good friends. And in the end, they put their arms around each other and saved them and get out of there. And humanity overcame all the terrible situation that they found themselves in. So it's a little bit of a snapshot of that kind of scene that's being faced in that terrible conflict. And so it's kind of crafted around that, and it's almost like a movie soundtrack. So the music speaks for itself, sort of thing.
That's awesome. Love it. Love it. So you have another single coming out on November 5th. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so this one's called Fortunate Sons, and it's a little bit more lively and bubbly and good sort of time. Again, it's very retro, um, very kind of Eagles-ish, I'd like to say, probably. Um, and it's about some guys that were playing music together, and then maybe had a bit too much wine. It all fell apart, and they went their separate ways. But then came back together one more time for a great show with a great audience, and just a simple story of reunion. That's basically the hook.
I love it. I think from both of the songs you talked about, there is definitely a focus on the storytelling. So, from a writing standpoint, are lyrics something that you love to focus on more than melody or the other way around?
I think it's probably equal measure. I always start off with just throwing a few chords around, and then the melody starts to come to you, and then depending on how that started to sound, then I start to think about the theme. So the theme comes around, and then you start to sort of work on maybe a little bit of verse or a little bit of a chorus, and I just write a story around that. So it's very rare that I sing about personal experience. It's more sort of creating a scene or a story or something that people can relate to. That's the most important thing.
That's so interesting that you tend to start with chords and kind of take the musical atmosphere to determine the theme of the song. That's a complete opposite from what I do. I always start with a concept or lyrics that are really personal for my life, and then I'll build up melody from that and then move on to the chords. So you're opposite from me.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting, and it's great to share these kind of insights because you might assume that everybody's doing the same thing until you start to talk about it, and I've sort of I've read stories about um, singers that'll just put some words together, throw them on the floor, and then decide, and then they'll look at which order they land on the floor. There's all sorts of crazy stuff, crazy stuff like that. I think David Bowie was kind of very obscure the way that he crafted his lyrics, and you sometimes think, "What the hell is this about?" And I think sometimes a word sounds great, so I just use that word. I want to put it in there somewhere because it just sounds good.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing about others' processes because we all get the same end product, right? We all end up with a song, but the way we get there is different. And it's really cool hearing the different processes because just from hearing some things, not only from doing the podcast, but co writing with other songwriters, everybody has things that work for them and these different techniques and tools that maybe I haven't even heard of. And when you start to hear about those things, you can try them out yourself and see, oh, maybe this will work for me too. And it just opens more creative doors, I think. So I think it's so cool hearing everybody's processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just this week I've reached out to a couple of guys that just to see if there's any appetite to collaborate. So to start writing with other people for the first time in a long time, I think is the next thing I want to try and do, just to get a bit more variation in the end product.
That's a really good point, too. I completely agree that collaboration, whether it be in the writing or in the recording, performing, whatever, whenever you get the opportunity to bring other people in on something creative, the coolest thing is that if you were writing a song, say you had an idea for a song, if you would write that song by yourself, And if you write that song with somebody else, it's going to be completely different because you're basically bringing your own lives, perspectives, experiences, and own personal lens for that song into it. And it becomes a mix of everybody and their opinions and who they are as people. And I think collaboration is so beautiful because you basically start with absolutely nothing and then two or more people together create something amazing. So I love collaboration.
Yeah, and I think also everyone's got kind of a half-written song which they just can't seem to finish. And sometimes you go, Can you think of anything that might go with this?" And all of a sudden they'll strike a melody up, and then you think, "Ah, yeah," and then we can do that, and then it just builds from there. So I love that. That's superb. And it's just not that I never wanted to write with people, because I have done in the past. It's just always been a case with bands that you kind of someone will bring a song to the band, and then someone else will bring a song to the band. And very often you just go with that, and you just get on with it. Whereas I think what I want to do more and more now is to really sort of bounce ideas off a little bit, sort of Lennon McCartney style, and get back into those old ways of doing things.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely. I love it. So, this has been a fantastic conversation. Before we go, though, can you share any advice for any songwriters listening who may be struggling to chase their dreams?
Well, I'd always say never give up. I've been doing this for 40 years, just over. So it's never too late. There's always something out there. If it's your passion, you're going to enjoy it anyway. Just enjoy it. Keep doing it. Keep doing what you believe in, and somewhere out there, someone will enjoy what you're doing too.
Fabulous. Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining me. Where can everybody find you online and listen to your music?
Great. Thanks very much for having me on. So if you head over to www.jasoncallear.co.uk, and you'll also find me on Linktree. All of the usuals: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's all on there. There's some great little tips and tricks that we've been putting together on Instagram, little reels of recording processes, and some of the techniques that we've been using in there. So head over there and have a look, and you'll see some old clips as well from some old studios. So all about what we've been talking about today. So that'd be great to see you on there, and great to get some feedback.
Fabulous. Thank you so much again for joining me. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jason. And of course, until next time, stay
Stay
right
right on
on
track.
track.